Welcome back. We are diving into the operations side of design today, which, it's arguably the most critical area for professional success.
It really is.
This is architectural records and professional practices of the services of King-Kambuf's architecture design studios. And our issue today is project management, or PjM.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, building that project work plan. We're talking scope, fees, and hours.
Right. And today we are moving past that celebratory moment of getting a signed contract.
That's top the champagne moment.
Exactly. And we're getting into the absolute non-negotiable mechanics of execution. For you listening, this is really the difference between having a project on paper and actually, generating profit while delivering something high quality.
So the mission today is pretty rigorous.
It is. We want to turn that signed external agreement into a robust, enforceable, and internal work plan.
Okay, let's unpack that because that's a crucial pivot point. Most of us, we focus so heavily on the external agreement, right? The contract that goes to the client.
Sure.
But what we're diving into now is that internal contract, that financial and logistical scaffolding that the project manager builds
That's the key.
to make sure you get high quality without blowing the fee. It's where the rubber meets the road.
Exactly. This deep dive is squarely focused on project management. So work planning, resource management, and execution.
Okay.
Now, there's some overlap with practice management, profitability, utilization targets. But the core, the day-to-day challenge here is controlling the only fuel you really manage internally.
Which is?
Hours. It's always hours.
I think here's the core takeaway for anyone listening. It doesn't matter if you're running a small firm or managing some massive institutional project.
Right.
This knowledge is the shortcut to proactive risk management. If you can master work breakdown structures, detailed phase budgets, and staffing allocation, you gain control.
You are, in essence, learning to manage this finite pool of resources, those available hours, against what can feel like infinite client expectations.
It truly is all about control, isn't it?
It is. If you skip this rigorous planning step, you're basically resigning yourself to managing by crisis.
Oh, I've seen that. You go from manager to firefighter.
Instantly. The moment the first unexpected RFI lands or, the city planning department throws you a curveball, this plan is preventative medicine. It's what keeps you from financial failure.
Okay, so let's define the core conflict that every successful work plan has to solve. The source material highlights three realities that, well, they just never align naturally.
They never do. And the whole purpose of your internal plan is to force them into alignment.
What are they?
Okay, so these three conflicting forces are scope, fee, and hours.
Scope, fee, hours.
You've got the scope, which is that detailed list of deliverables, meetings, all the obligations you are legally required to provide.
Okay.
Then you have the fee. That's the finite amount of money, usually a lump sum, that the firm gets paid for that work.
And the last one.
And finally, you have the hours, the resource expenditure, the time charged by your staff that your team actually controls day to day.
I see firms make this mistake all the time. They focus so much on getting the scope right in the proposal, but then once the contract's signed, they just treat the fee and the hours like this vague bucket of money and time.
Hoping it'll just balance out.
Yeah, just hoping it works out in the end.
And that is the absolute trap. This is particularly relevant when you think about the traditional constraints of project delivery. A lot of people assume the primary constraint is the schedule.
The timeline?
Right, the project timeline. But in the real world, the schedule is often fixed by things you can't control. Client financing deadlines, permit submission windows, maybe a lease is expiring. You usually can't change the schedule.
So the real killer isn't the clock.
The real silent killer of profitability and quality isn't the schedule. It's the uncontrolled, unmanaged fee burn.
Fee burn. That's a powerful term. Let's define it. How does that show up week to week for a project team?
It shows up as panic and compromised quality. Imagine you budgeted, say, 40 hours for a set of coordination meetings. If your team spends 60 hours, that 20-hour deficit, that burned fee, it doesn't just vanish. It has to be absorbed by other tasks.
So something else gets less time.
Exactly. This is when the project architect decides they can't spend time double-checking their structural interface details. Or maybe the PM decides to skip the internal QA/QC review. Fee burn silently erodes the quality buffers you built into your plan.
So if you don't reconcile scope, fee, and hours with rigor right up front, you're basically guaranteeing one of two outcomes.
Yep.
Either an unprofitable project where the firm is just subsidizing the client's scope,
Well,
or a project where you cut essential internal steps like coordination or quality review just to finish on budget.
and if you cut corners, that usually means sacrificing the internal rigor that protects the firm. We know that, reduced QA/QC or coordination, those aren't savings. They are deferred failures.
Failures.
They multiply into RFIs, change orders, and massive liability exposure during construction. This whole planning process is about creating a financially secure foundation so you don't have to compromise quality when things get complicated,
Which they always do.
which they always do.
So this brings us to the first fundamental step. We have to emphasize this. You just cannot budget hours based on, vibes.
Or vague historical averages.
The process has to start rigorously with a formal, detailed scope map.
That's absolutely critical. A scope map turns that narrative, kind of aspirational proposal document into an actionable, detailed inventory of work. If you haven't meticulously detailed the precise scope, what's in, what's out, what defines done, your budget is just meaningless speculation.
Okay, let's dive into the key components that need to be in this map. The list from the source material details the deliverables, but I think the real value is in defining the less obvious things that just eat up time.
Right. Starting with the obvious, you need a detailed list of deliverables by phase. SD, DD, CD, BID, CA. This defines the tangible products you're handing over.
So for instance, is the SD deliverable just a sketch package, or does it include like 3D massing model files?
I have to be that specific.
But the true time sink, as we know from experience, it's rarely just drawing production. It's the time spent getting permission to draw or revising what you've already done.
100%. Which means the meetings and workshops have to be quantified.
They have to be.
Those user groups, community input sessions, agency reviews, all those value engineering workshops, they drain hours so fast. And they often involve your highest cost people, principals, or senior staff, and they are frequently poorly estimated.
So if the contract says up to 10 user group meetings, you need to budget for those.
You immediately budget those hours for the necessary attendees and you multiply it by prep time. And then you need a clear definition of consultant coordination obligations. Who integrates what? This is where scope gaps just kill you.
So are you responsible for locating and coordinating the site utility connections on your plans, or is that strictly the civil engineer's job?
You have to document those interfaces. It prevents massive, budget-crushing, duplicated effort and rework.
Okay, now here's where I want to introduce a little bit of friction. The expert-level planning really comes in with defining those crucial, often overlooked items, the assumptions and exclusions. But, doesn't rigorously defining exclusions risk spooking the client during the proposal stage?
That's a fair business concern. But ethically and professionally, transparency is always the higher standard. When you manage it correctly, listing assumptions and exclusions is your greatest asset. It's your legal protection. It's your financial fence line.
Okay, so give me an example.
So an assumption might be, the fee assumes no more than 2 pricing alternates are required. Or, revision limits are set at 1 major client review and revision cycle per phase.
So instead of saying, we won't do X, you frame it as, this fee covers this established baseline of services, and anything outside that will require an adjustment.
Exactly. And that is the entire purpose of defining those basic versus additional services triggers. By defining that fence line clearly in the scope map, and maybe reconfirming it at the start of each phase, you create the professional and ethical opportunity to tell the client, this new request, while we welcome it, falls outside the definition of basic services.
We can do it, but...
We can certainly accommodate it, but we need an additional services authorization.
That immediately makes me think of the classic RE pattern we see. If a client casually asks for just one more design option, late in schematic design.
The first step is not to start sketching.
Absolutely not.
No, the standard of care response is always to document the scope impact. You have to calculate exactly how much time and potential schedule delay that new option requires and confirm if it's basic or additional before you commit a single hour of resources.
Because if you do the work first,
you've destroyed your leverage to negotiate a fee adjustment. You've essentially absorbed the cost, making the resulting budget overspend your problem, not the client's decision. This planning enforces that boundary.
Okay, so the scope is locked. We know what we need to deliver. Now we need the structure to track the work. That's the work breakdown structure, the WBS.
Right.
The material emphasizes that a useful WBS isn't theoretical. It has to meticulously mirror how the office actually charges time.
This is fundamental. It's essential for accurate tracking and for generating future fees. If your time tracking system uses codes that don't match the structure you use to budget, you won't get meaningful reports.
You're flying blind.
You really are. You can't tell if you're over budget on consultant coordination versus just design time until the phase is already financially exhausted. The WBS has to be granular enough to track the hours exactly where they're spent.
Let's detail that hierarchy then. Level 1, the broadest category.
Level 1 is just the major project phases, so
Yeah.
the biggest buckets. 100 for SD, 200 for DD, 300 for CD, 400 for procurement or bid, and 500 for CA and closeout.
So that's the when.
That's a temporal framework, yeah, the non-negotiable milestones.
Okay, moving to level 2, the work streams. This is where we break down the type of work within those phases. And this has to go way beyond just architecture and consult.
Oh, absolutely. Within every phase, you have to allocate budget to those crucial non-design items that consume so much staff time.
Like what?
We recommend dedicated level 2 buckets for project management, so scheduling, financial tracking, internal review, then consultant coordination, which is interface meetings, redline reviews, QA/QC, AHJ interfaces, that's authority having jurisdiction, so code analysis, zoning submissions,
And the admin stuff?
and critically, by admin. Model setup, content creation, plotting, transmittals, digital file hygiene. If you just lump PM or coordination into design, you instantly lose financial visibility into those essential management costs.
And level 3 gets down to specific trackable tasks. Can you give us some examples of what level 3 tasks look like inside, say, the CD phase?
Sure. Inside CDs, level 3 tasks have to be actionable and auditable. So things like code narrative update to reflect 90% CD status, structural detail sheet production, client sign-off package compilation and issue, or MEP heat load calculation review and sign-off.
These are the micro-level assignments that staff charge time directly against.
Exactly, typically lasting somewhere between 2 and 20 hours.
Okay, now for the crucial key move that often separates the successful PMs from the struggling ones, explicitly budgeting for those LOE or level of effort buckets. You've called them silent tillers. Why is budgeting time for things like email coordination so vital?
They are silent killers because they represent necessary admin or communication time that happens no matter what, and they aggregate into hundreds of hours over a project.
Okay.
If your staff charges every internal pinup, every detailed email thread with the client, every BIM model cleanup, or every meeting note transcription to a broad task like DD design documentation, that bucket quickly looks wildly over budget.
Which then forces the PM to ask the wrong question, right? Is the design taking too long, or is our communication process just really expensive?
Exactly. But by creating explicit LOE buckets work streams like email phone coordination, internal team collaboration and pinups, or BIM model hygiene, you isolate that necessary but kind of amorphous administrative time.
And that gives you clarity.
It gives you honesty. If you budget 60 explicit hours for email and phone coordination during DE, and you hit 60 hours, you validated that communication for this project genuinely costs 60 hours. If you didn't budget for it, those 60 hours just magically erode your main design budget.
Which leads to the false conclusion that the design team is inefficient.
Right, when in fact the coordination demands were just high. It enforces budget honesty, and it prevents staff morale from cratering because the perceived overruns they didn't even cause.
Scope is locked, WBS is defined. Now for the money. How do we translate that lump sum fee into actionable finite hour targets?
Well, we start by translating the entire fee into a total available hour budget. We can walk through that calculation later, but once we have that total number, most offices start by applying a standard proportional split.
A rule of thumb.
A rule of thumb, yeah, recognizing the relative effort for each phase. A common first pass might look like SD at 15% of total hours, DD at 20%, CD at 40%, procurement at 5%, and CA at 20%.
That 100% split is the baseline, but we know no two projects are identical. You have to refine those percentages based on risk.
This is where professional judgment and risk forecasting really kick in. You have to adjust those baseline percentages.
So for instance, a project with complex permitting.
If you know the jurisdiction is highly bureaucratic, maybe requiring multi-stage approvals like a historical review board or complicated zoning variances, you have to increase the early phase allocations.
So more time in SD and DD.
Right. You might push SD&D from 15% and 20% up to 20% and 25%, and you steal that time from CD because your greatest risk is early review and rework.
What about a project with heavy construction administration?
If the project involves complex institutional work, phase occupancy, maybe highly custom materials, the CA phase is going to be heavy and long. So you might increase CA from 20% to 25% or even 30%.
Which means your CD hours have to be ruthlessly efficient.
Exactly. And for a fast-track delivery where design and construction overlap, you need a massive front-loading of PM and coordination time right from the start.
And in all of these scenarios, the greater the risk, the more crucial the management reserve becomes. Let's really emphasize this. Why is a reserve unassigned hours and money a necessity, not a luxury?
The management reserve is the PM's emergency oxygen tank. It's typically set aside at 5% to 10% of the total available hours, and it is explicitly not allocated to SD, DD, or CD up front.
It's the buffer.
It's the buffer against the inevitable unexpected issues. The 3 pages of unanticipated city comments, a client funding delay that messes up your staffing, a major structural challenge discovered late in DD.
It keeps you from panicking.
The reserve provides a controlled buffer that prevents an immediate budget panic or forcing the team to cut quality. It's what keeps you solvent until you can negotiate an official additional services authorization.
Okay, so we have our hours allocated per phase. Now we need to map those targets to specific people over time. The staffing plan, you described it visually as a histogram.
Right, a time-based distribution of hours.
What does a staffing plan do that simple hour tracking doesn't?
A staffing plan moves beyond just tracking time. It's a precise resource allocation and forecasting model. It details who by role, like PM, PA, job captain, when, by week or month, and how many hours per week they're expected to charge.
Which is essential not just for the project budget, but for the whole firm's utilization management.
Exactly. You don't want to overcommit your staff across multiple demanding projects.
Let's look at the classic flow of staffing on that histogram because the labor profile changes dramatically over the project.
It really does. The project manager, the PM, should have a pretty steady load throughout all phases, maybe 8 to 15 hours a week. Their role is about duration and consistency.
But the project architect,
The project architect, or PA, shows high spikes, especially in DD and CD. They're translating design intent into technical reality and managing all that consultant coordination.
and the production labor, that's the bulk of the hours, right?
The production team job captains, technologists, drafters, they ramp up hard and fast, specifically in the CD phase. CDs are production heavy. That's a massive spike on the histogram.
And QA/QC, the thing that so often gets cut when the fee gets tight.
It must be a strategic, dedicated spike, not an afterthought. It needs focused attention at major milestones, before issuing the 50% DD set, at 75% CD, and right before the final pre-issue package.
If you don't explicitly budget time for a senior person to review those documents.
It won't happen, and you introduce significant risk.
This all ties into the control concept, setting a burn rate target. So if you know your DD hours are 500 over 10 weeks, you have a 50-hour per week target. Why is that so vital?
Because it shifts accountability from are we done to are we spending too much to get done. If you set a target of, say, 150 hours per week for your combined DD team, and your weekly time report comes in at 250 hours,
Red flag.
it's an immediate variance report indicating deep trouble. If you don't set that target, you only discover the overrun weeks later when the case budget is already gone. The burn rate target allows for immediate course correction, while the problem is still small enough to manage.
Okay, we've established that managing time is everything. But the source material emphasizes why common sense metrics like percent complete of drawings can be so misleading.
Right.
Why is that metric useless without comparing it to percent fee burn?
Percent complete on its own is what we call a vanity metric. It feels good, but it offers zero financial insight. If you announce, we are 80% complete on construction documents, that sounds great. But if you've already spent 110% of your total CD hours, you are financially upside down. You can't possibly meet the remaining quality requirements without hemorrhaging money. You need the full picture. Which brings us to earned value.
Let's define that for architecture. How does an architect earn value?
Earned value, or EV, measures the value of the work actually accomplished against the baseline budget. In our world, value is typically earned when you hit a documented, auditable milestone.
Like a submission.
Exactly.
Right.
A 50% CD submission, a municipal approval, a client sign-off on the DD package. If you spend 100 hours, that's the burn value, trying to get the DD package out, but the client hasn't signed off and the package hasn't left the office.
Your milestone isn't hit.
Your milestone isn't hit, so your EV is essentially zero, or at best, well below your burn value. That discrepancy is your critical warning sign.
So what does the optimal PM dashboard look like? What gives the clearest picture?
It needs 3 core, highly correlated metrics, tracked by phase and by work stream. First, budgeted hours versus actual hours. That's your immediate operational variance. Second, earned value versus planned value. Are we hitting our milestones on time relative to our budget? And third, fee burn, which is actual labor cost versus the fee. This is the crucial financial health indicator. It tells you, in real dollars, how far you are from profitability.
And this dashboard feeds directly into that crucial airy pattern. When budget drift is spotted, when hours burned outpace progress, what's the correct management action?
The correct action is almost never work faster or cut coordination. The professional standard of care response is always forecasting and scope management.
So you reforecast.
You immediately reforecast the remaining tasks. You document why there's a variance, was a client indecision, consultant delays, and then you propose a specific documented corrective plan to the owner. The goal is always transparency and regaining control.
Let's apply this to a stressful, real-world scenario, a case study.
Let's do it.
We have a 45,000 square foot outpatient clinic project, design bid build, the schedule's tight, a 14-week permit window.
Okay, that 14-week window is the immediate risk factor. It tells us coordination and speed are paramount, and the buffer for revisions is basically zero. The PM has to be extremely disciplined.
But discipline meets reality. The team is already 65% through their SD hour budget. They're close to financial exhaustion for the phase when the owner decides to add 6 additional exam rooms and 1 specialized imaging suite.
Of course they do.
An MRI, let's say. And the owner insists, it's still just schematic, so let's just fold it in.
This is the moment. This is where the PM has to draw a clear, defensible line based on that initial scope map. The owner's statement is designed to minimize the cost, but the reality of an imaging suite alone that introduces immense nonlinear complexity.
You're talking specialized structural mods for vibration?
Dedicated power feeds, radiological shielding, significant life safety implications. This is not a simple add. This is a material change that fundamentally alters the project's scope and risk profile.
This single change could torpedo the entire project budget and schedule.
Absolutely. If the PM just says okay and starts drawing, they have instantly absorbed the cost and the risk of that change. They've failed the project and the firm.
So a competent PM, adhering to the standard of care, has to execute a mandatory 5-step workflow. What is the very first step?
Step 1. Freeze the SD deliverable definition in writing. The PM must immediately stop all new design work on those new rooms and confirm exactly what the SD phase was contracted to include.
Based on the original scope map.
Based on the original scope map. Number of options, area, meeting count. They need to create a documented checklist of completed items for the original scope. The goal is to define the current closed contract boundary before you even discuss the new work.
Step 2 is the objective verification, the scope classification check.
Right, this is where you use facts, not feelings. The PM must verify if the requested change materially alters the core complexity. Does it change the total programmed area?
Yes.
Does it impact the site plan or parking?
Possibly.
Does it change structural, mechanical, or electrical loads significantly?
Yes, the imaging suite guarantees it.
Exactly. Because it impacts multiple systems and requires consultant rework, this confirms it's a fundamental additional service, requiring a fee and time adjustment.
No matter what the owner's timeline belief is.
Correct. So next, the PM needs to prepare that crucial analytical document, the mini work plan impact memo. This is the data-driven argument.
What's in it?
It has to be factual, professional, analytical. 1 or 2 pages focused entirely on the consequences. It details the revised program delta, the added square footage, plus the imaging complexity, the anticipated drawing and model rework across all disciplines, the necessary consultant recoordination,
The schedule risk.
the schedule risk, that 14-week clock is already running, and most critically, a clear proposed fee and hours adjustment. Not a request, it's a statement of the cost required to maintain quality.
Step 4 is the trust builder, putting the decision back in the owner's hands. Offer 2 honest options.
This is crucial for maintaining the client relationship while protecting the firm. You present option A, add services and fees, $40,000 and 350 hours to maintain the original quality and schedule.
Or
Or option B, hold the fee, but in return, the PM must propose clear, documented reductions in scope elsewhere.
Like what?
Maybe eliminating visualization packages, reducing the number of remaining client review meetings, or shifting certain detailing responsibilities to the contractor. The client has to acknowledge and document their decision. They have to accept the consequences.
And finally, step 5, rebaseline the work plan and staffing.
Right. If the change is approved, or if the client chooses option B, the original budgets are irrelevant. The PM has to update the WBS budgets and staffing histograms immediately. They need to add a specific early coordination spike for MEP and structural to integrate that complex imaging equipment.
You're correcting the plan.
You are. The SD overrun, combined with the new work, creates a documented deficit that must be corrected either by new fee or by recognized reductions in scope. You have to ensure your staff are working against honest targets.
We have to pause here because in this high-pressure scenario, one of the most tempting and dangerous suggestions always comes up. We can't tell the owner we're over budget, just have everyone charge their time to overhead until we catch up.
I hear that all the time.
It happens so often.
And this is an absolute, non-negotiable professional practice and ethics failure. It is the antithesis of the standard of care. You must never falsify time or billing records.
Beyond just the ethics of it, why is this approach so fundamentally damaging to the firm?
Because your time and billing data are essential business intelligence. They're the core data set for 4 crucial functions.
Okay, what are they?
1, future fee negotiation. You can't accurately bid your next clinic project if your records falsely show 120 fewer SD hours than you actually spent. 2, forecasting. Management relies on accurate time tracking to forecast firm-wide utilization and project future capacity. Falsified data leads to bad business decisions.
It pollutes your data.
Completely. 3, liability defense. In the event of litigation or dispute, accurate time records prove what work was actually performed. Hiding labor is an immediate liability flag. And 4, staff morale. It guarantees staff are either working uncompensated, undocumented overtime, which destroys morale, or they're rushing the work, which leads directly to under-resourced documents.
So the consequence isn't just a hit in costs, it's destroying the very data that allows the firm to take corrective action.
Precisely. The only move is honesty. Report accurately, forecast the revised completion date and hours needed, and present the client with honest options. That sequence protects the firm's data integrity, profitability, and professional standing.
Let's ground this whole deep dive in the quantitative reality now, because running the math is both a common exam move and an absolutely essential real-world skill for any PM.
Okay, let's use the numbers from the source material. We have a lump sum basic services fee of $320,000. And the firm's internal planning number, the blended billing rate target, is $120 an hour.
Step 1, the foundation. How many total hours can we actually spend on this project before we start eating into our profit?
The calculation is simple. Total hours equals the fee divided by the blended rate. So $320,000 divided by $120 per hour.
Which gives us
2,666 points in 67 hours. For planning, we'll round that up to 2,670 hours. This is the finite limit. If you spend 2,671 hours, you are cutting into your profit margin.
Now, before allocating those hours, we perform that mandatory risk mitigation step, pulling out that vital 5% management reserve.
Right, so 5% of 2,670 hours is 134 hours. We immediately pull that off the top and put it into the reserve bucket. That leaves us with 2,536 assignable hours to divide among the 5 major phases.
And that 5% is pretty standard.
It's standard for medium-risk projects. Higher risk might warrant 7% or even 10%.
Okay, now using our standard phase allocation split, SD 15%, DD 20%, CD 40%, BID 5%, CA 20%. Let's distribute those 2,536 hours.
Okay, SD at 15% gets 380 hours. DD at 20% gets 507 hours. CD at 40% gets 1,014 hours. BID at 5% gets 127 hours. And CA at 20% gets 507 hours.
380 hours for schematic design, 507 for design development. Those are the fixed budgets. What's the interpretation of those numbers in the context of our case study, the clinic that burned 500 hours in SD instead of 380?
That 380-hour SD budget is an operational limit. If the project team burns 500 hours, they have an immediate, unmitigated 120-hour overrun. It's a deficit. That 120 hours has to be funded.
Let's explore the immediate consequences of that deficit if the fee cannot be increased.
If the client refuses a fee increase and you can't cut scope from the remaining deliverables, that 120-hour deficit is immediately applied to the remaining phases.
So it comes out of DD and CD.
It's subtracted from the 507 DD hours and the 1,014 CD hours. This means your DD team might have only 450 hours instead of 507, forcing them to rush coordination. Your CD team is similarly restricted.
And rush DD and CD means?
It means missing details, poor consultant coordination, and ultimately an increased RFI count during construction. The numbers demand immediate action. Either get the fee increase or accept the risk of the resulting quality reduction and liability exposure.
It just reinforces that the only thing you control is the hours, and you have to respect those targets.
You do, because the financial cost of missing them is severe and often hidden until it's way too late.
Let's summarize this rigorous discussion into the core strategies and tactics that you should keep in mind, whether you're facing a complex project or, an exam scenario on PjM.
Strategy number 1, reinforced by our math. When you see a lump sum fee plus a targeted billing rate, immediately translate that to total hours. That conversion clarifies the real size of your resource challenge. Think in hours remaining, not percentage of fee.
Strategy 2, directly related to managing scope creep and protecting the firm. If a request smells like scope creep, what is the ironclad, defensible sequence of action?
The professional sequence is non-negotiable. Document the request in writing. Classify it as basic or additional service arity. Get written authorization and a fee adjustment, then and only then proceed.
And skipping that get written authorization step is a financial and professional failure.
A huge one.
And finally, strategy 3, the risk trap warning. What internal activities should a PM never, ever choose to cut to try and save budget hours?
Never choose answers or actions that save time by skipping coordination with consultants, eliminating internal team pinups, or reducing QA/QC checks. These are not savings.
They are deferred failures.
They are deferred failures. You have to budget for the internal rigor necessary to produce complete coordinated documents, even if that rigor feels expensive up front. Ignoring those steps increases the cost of fixing errors during construction by orders of magnitude. Your liability exposure becomes unacceptable.
Okay, to bring this comprehensive deep dive into project work planning to a close, let's reiterate the essentials. First, on managing client expectations.
No written authorization means no scope expansion. That rule protects your profitability and your team's capacity.
Second, regarding tracking and financial health, the difference between a proactive manager and a reactive firefighter.
Forecast early and track accurately. Overruns are easiest to fix when they are small and when your data integrity is intact. Never, ever hide time.
And finally, summing up that core equation we established at the beginning, scope, fee, and hours have to reconcile. If the fee won't change, what's the inevitable consequence?
If the fee is fixed and won't change, something else must. Either the scope is reduced and redefined with the owner's agreement, the schedule is compressed, which increases quality risk, or the quality will suffer, leading directly to increased long-term liability for the firm. Project management is the constant, honest art of managing those trade-offs.
We spent this entire deep dive focusing on the internal contract, how you manage the firm's hours against the client fee. But let's take this structured WBS thinking and apply it directly to your own professional workflow this week.
We discussed those critical LOE buckets that have to be explicitly budgeted: email, phone coordination, internal admin, decision logging.
Right. So how effectively could you audit your own time management habits right now outside of a project using that WBS model? When you're planning a high-value task, are you dedicating 40 hours to design, but letting 15 hours of unchecked personal overhead?
Checking irrelevant emails, switching focus.
Planning future projects. Get charged to that high-value bucket.
If you track your personal efficiency using this WBS mindset, you might quickly discover that poor personal LOE management is killing your productivity and eroding your personal capacity, just like it kills a project budget.
It's the difference between working hard and working strategically.
It is.
So your call to action tonight, build a simple one-page WBS template for yourself. Immediately. Just the phases of your week, the critical work streams, and those pesky required LOE buckets. Apply that structure to your next big task and start tracking exactly how fast your personal hours burn.
That structure is the essential first step toward professional control, both for the project and for your own career trajectory.
That's it for this edition of Architectural Records and Professional Practices of the Services of KING-KAMBUF's Architecture Design Studios. We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.